All right. Thinking about the family, thinking about working parents, the Bible presents, we've touched on this before. Some of this is going to be going over things we touched before, maybe from a slightly different angle, but we want to plow through it in as much as it was in the lesson. But there are roles that are given to fathers and mothers in the home. And one of those roles, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8, for the father in particular. Let's read that. 1 Timothy 5, 8. Who's got that? Go ahead, Ron.
But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
Okay. First of all, how do we know this is for the man? How do we know it's for the man? He's the head of the house. His own household, he has denied the faith. Pronouns are in there for a reason. And so it is addressing specifically men and their role, their responsibility in the family. Ephesians 6, verse 4. Ephesians 6, verse 4. Who's got that for us? Zach, you want to get that? Okay, so they have a responsibility of raising their children, making sure their children are raised right, and not just a passive role in that, but also an active role in that. And Titus chapter 2, verses 4 and 5. Let's remind ourselves of what the older women are to teach the younger women. Titus 2, 4, and 5. Who's got that? Go ahead, Carter. Okay, when we think of role in the home, what applies particularly to the role in the home? Father's breadwinner, that's his primary, that duty is primarily put on his shoulders. He's addressed about the children and them being raised. What do we have here? For the women, Titus 2, 4, and 5, yeah. Okay, homemakers would be one that would kind of jump out. Others are characteristics, behaviors they're to have, attitudes maybe that they are to have, but homemakers, you think specifically for the role, duties, responsibilities in that relationship as a wife, as a mother. So to manage the home. One of the things the workbook went through was society and how it's changed. I want us to think about this just from the perspective of over the past, this is a little bit longer time frame, 200 years, how things have changed in our society. And I would say quite a few societies, at least in the Western world. Question A under introduction was what existed in the good old days that needs to be restored. Okay, respect for the nuclear family. Carrie? Okay, uninterrupted time with the family. Okay, all right. Ecclesiastes 7:10. I want us to note this before we discuss some things more specific regarding this. Ecclesiastes 7:10. Who's got that for us? Ron?
Do not say, why were the former days better than these? For you did not inquire wisely concerning this.
Okay. What's the danger in looking back at the good old days?
We kind of done this, look at it rather romantically, remember the things that might be highly favorable, but we discount the things that were unfavorable oftentimes.
Right. So I want to caution us when we think about these things that, yes, there were good things in times past, but those were coupled to things that weren't as good, and we wouldn't want the two of them. We just want to take the good and leave maybe the negative side off of it. So we just want to be cautious about this. But I want us to think for just a moment. If you think of the 18th century and before, so the 1700s and going back in history, what Western society looked like, the beginning of this country, what our society looked like, how homes and families functioned, what did they look like? What did it look like in England at the time, or even in Western Europe in general? It could be France or Germany or whatnot. But you think about that. Among the lower classes in society, what would a typical home or family look like? Tom? Okay. They're poor. They're just getting by. Carrie? Okay. In Great Britain, one of the things was there were a lot of tenant farmers. They didn't own the land, but they lived on it. They worked it, and they gave whoever was the lord of the estate, they would give them a portion. They would keep a portion. They would live off of it, things like that. Zach, did you have something? Back? Anybody else? A lot of people in this country were just subsistence farmers. They had a little plot of land. They raised what they could raise. They had what animals they could have, whether that was cows or pigs, chickens, or whatnot. And they just lived off of that. But that family unit was there. The father got up to work. What did the mother do? She got up to work. What did the children do when they got a little bit bigger? They got up to work. Everybody got up to work, and they were working, and they were out in the field, and depending on the ages, depending on what they might be able to do, maybe it's just help mom around the house, maybe it's actually get out, and when they get older, the heavier physical labor, but that's what everybody was involved in. They were there, and their life revolved around getting by. And so there was a lot of time together, and they ate their meals together. And so there was a certain just functionality of that kind of life that it cemented that family and their relationships day in and day out. You know, they might go to town every so often. They might go to church on Sunday. And so they would go and they would interact with other people. There might be neighbors that they help out, help each other out, sowing, planting the crop and then harvesting the crop and things. But you had a really tight-knit nuclear family in that, and they did struggle very often to get by from day to day. You had tradesmen like blacksmith or stonemasons or whatnot. Some of them served as servants on larger estates, and they may or may not be married and have families in a situation like that. The upper classes, what did their families look like? Okay, servants, which means what? Well, they would spend more time to be educated because they could do that. They had free time in that. You had housemaids. So the woman of the house and the girls are not really doing the work, but the housemaids are doing the work. Nannies. Parents were almost totally absent for their kids' life except for an hour or two a day or whatnot. There's governesses or governors who would educate the children, maybe. And so those families were radically different than the lower class families and the way they interacted with each other day to day and the struggles they had to go through. Well, coming forward, then 19th century and forward, the 1800s and forward with the Industrial Revolution, what changed? Okay. Why would they do that? Jobs where? Where in the city? Factories, right. So factory work, going in and being there. Zach? And that comes maybe a little bit later, Frank? Well, we'll get to that in just a second. But I want to think about the fact that when the Industrial Revolution came along and there were factories that came along and families moved into the city, or maybe even if they lived close enough, they could get into the city to work their shift. But, you know, when it first came around, you're talking about 12-hour plus shifts maybe that they worked in these, and the father's away from the home and the mother's there with the children, and it changed the dynamic of the family. Yes. Until we had those labor laws, yes, children would be hired in those factories in certain jobs as well. But I just want us to think about the dynamic of the family and how it changed over time. And then in World War II, what do we have, Frank? Why the women? Is that because people were like, hey, we just need to hire a bunch of women in 1942? Okay. The men had to go off the war. Those factory jobs are left empty. The women were brought in and worked. And then it just kind of continued on from there, and that changed another dynamic. Also, there's the rise of feminism in our society, and how that women began to be told, especially 50s going into the 60s, you know, you are unhappy at home. You need to be unhappy. You have as much right as a man to be out there, to be educated, to take these professional jobs, to get out there, to earn your own money, to be your own person. They're no better than you are. And so go out and compete with the men in those things. And it began to really be preached in our society that being a stay-at-home mom is an inferior thing for you to do. You're less than when you do that. And so there's just this huge societal change that has been experienced. I know 200 years is a long time, but over the past 200 years, that has really changed. Because you go back in time, between then and going back to really just post-flood, there wasn't that much of a change as far as family and societal and working and subsistence farming and servants that serve, you know, rich people. But a lot of things have changed in modern times. So let's think about that as we're going through this. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians 3. 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, and one of the things that was asked in the book, and we touched on this before, but 2 Thessalonians 3 verse 10, and what does that tell us? Anybody? Doesn't work, you shouldn't eat. Okay. So we need to work. Work is a good thing. And if somebody doesn't work, as he goes on in 2 Thessalonians 3 to point out, that then you're to be treated as an outcast by the brethren. Don't keep company with him, that he may be ashamed. So work is absolutely essential. Now, one of the questions under honor of work that is regarding the fathers, what 2 reasons should a man work? We touched on one of them before. What was that? Provide for his family. Break that down. What does that cover? Provide for your family. Okay, house, food, clothing. Break down family. Who does that include? Wife and children? Say that again. Okay. And one of the things you notice about biblical times, and I think more so in the past, and it's still this way in third world countries, multi-generational homes. Where in our society, we've had such an abundance of wealth, we could live separately and be in our own place. Whereas it used to be, it was not uncommon to have grandmother, grandfather, the widow grandmother, the widow mother-in-law live with you from the time she was in her 50s or 60s until she was in her 80s or 90s. And that was in one home. Mm-hmm. Right, and they're much tighter knit there. Yes. In our neighborhood, there's a couple of Asian families, and you can see very readily there's 3, maybe 4 generations in that home. Andrew. Okay. That's a factor that we're going to loop in here in just a little bit. That is true. Did you have something, Chris? Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Or even like, and I know this is a little bit different, but Andy Griffith and Aunt B, and it was. The point is, it wasn't uncommon. It's been more in modern times where we've had the wealth, the resources that we divide out in our families, and we live in separate homes and things like that. But the point is, a man is charged to provide. What he says in 1 Timothy 5 is not just for your wife and your children, but for your mother, your mother-in-law, your father-in-law. The principle extends out further into that family, that you have a duty, you have a responsibility to take care of them, instead of putting it on the church for the church to take care of them. Granted that they are faithful Christians. So you have responsibilities in that. What is another reason we are to work? Elaine. Okay. Right. 2 Thessalonians 3 really addresses that part of it, that become busybodies in other people's matters. You need work because work's good. God created work. He commanded work all the way back in Genesis 2:15. Work was a good thing. Work's not a curse. It's a good thing. It's healthy for us.
That also is a reason for us to be working to be prosperous, so that we have the ability to provide those 2 areas.
Exactly. That's exactly where I wanted to go. Look at Ephesians 4. Ephesians 4, verse 28. Ephesians 4:28. And who will read that for us? Go ahead, Ron.
Let him steal no longer, but rather let him labor, working with his hands what is good, that he may have something to give him who has need.
Okay. So a couple things in this. working is good. Of course, stealing's wrong, but you work and you labor in order to have something that it's beyond your personal needs. You want to be in a position to help out somebody who has a need. And it's implied, it's stating, there are others who have needs that they can't provide for. We're going to have the poor with us always. There's going to be people that can't work. Sickness, age, handicap, something where people need some help. Or maybe they're able to work, but they just can't earn enough. Maybe it is that a woman's been widowed and she's left to care for her children, and she just can't make enough to get by. Maybe she needs some help to get along. And we as neighbors of that woman, hey, let me help you out here. So we need to help other people out. We need to help neighbors. Who else do we need to help? Galatians 6. Go back to Galatians 6. Galatians 6:10 to start with. Elijah? Okay. So, friends, neighbors, and brethren. Verse 6. What does that say? Okay. Is this outside the Sunday contribution? Yeah. This really is addressing outside of that Sunday contribution. That this is talking about, remember, this whole section is on a personal level. That's one of the reasons we point out here in verse 10, this isn't church action. This isn't the congregation helping out those, and especially a household of faith. This is individual action that he's talking about. In verse 6, is talking about how individuals need to be thinking about those who are teaching them that Word of God. 1 Corinthians chapter 16. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verses 1 and 2. And by the way, I've known brethren who have done that, who have been mindful of it and have helped out, either because there was a need present, they've helped personally, individually, outside the contribution, or they just said, here's a gift, enjoy, bless, use as you need, or whatever it may be. Could be gift cards or stuff like that. Not soliciting. 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. 1 Corinthians 16, 1 and 2. What do we have there, Micah? Oh, go ahead. All right. So, working, as Ron mentioned, because you have what in mind? What would this be? Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, he talks about, he uses that specific of needy saints, knowing Philippians 4 and how that Paul received support from Philippi. We understand that the general work of the church is financed through the first day of the week contributions. So when we're working, we're thinking about our family, helping to take care of them. We're thinking about neighbors, maybe thinking about brethren who are in need, but then also thinking about the kingdom, supporting the work of the kingdom and helping to get it advanced, because where we meet, no matter where we meet, no matter where a congregation assembles, there's work, there are things that have to be taken care of financially. There's just no getting around that. Zach.
There's also working for yourself. Not that it's helping. We need to work for our own psyche, because if we don't work, we do rest. And that's what God does in Ezekiel 17, is in the giving of the Ten Commandments. 6 days you shall labor, and the 7th day you shall rest. We understand that concept of work and rest. We're not going to understand that if we're not working for we're not working towards the right thing.
Yes, it helps us to appreciate, and working helps us appreciate what we have. Because I work for this home, I work for this food, I work for this car, and so therefore I value it, and I will take care of it. Yes. And thinking about the supporting of the kingdom, there are those who, when they're working, they think about that, and it may be, I've known of some people that, they think, well, this raise or this new position that comes with a little more salary or whatnot, then I'm going to do something for the kingdom in that. I've known people, they get tax refunds, and they put a portion, maybe even all of it, into the contribution because they're thinking, that's what I need to be helping to support. But it's just this idea, it goes beyond just family and taking care of our daily needs. There are other reasons the Bible gives for working, looking out for others, thinking about the kingdom, all those kinds of things. So thinking about this family relationship, the husband, thinking about there are many reasons why I work, why I go out to earn money that goes beyond just this family. The wife needs to be thinking about supporting him, understanding that, because you have to sit down and you got to figure out, where's our money going? What are we doing with it? Well, you need to be on the same page in those kinds of things. And as the book pointed out, Ephesians chapter 6 is specific about this relationship when you work for someone else. And here, in the first century context, the idea of bondservants, you're a slave to someone else, you're a bondservant. And what's that attitude with which we are to work? Ephesians 6. Go ahead. Right, exactly right. And so that includes, honest work and conduct in the workplace, respectful, diligent in that, not being slack in your work and things like that. And so all of that is a part of it. Now, jumping into the section about mothers and the honor of work for mothers, one of the things that it asked about is list and discuss other women and their work. So women in the Bible who worked, what do we have? Who can you think of in the Bible, women who worked? And we're talking about really outside the home or in some type of vocation or occupation. Lydia, what did she do? Okay, and do you know about the selling of purple, what that was? Yes. So it was luxury items or luxury goods that she was a seller of. What would we call that type of woman today? I don't know if she designed, but she was a seller of her, so she's a sales lady. But she had her own business, evidently. She was an entrepreneur, as we might say. She sold these things. All right, so who else? Aquila and Priscilla. Okay, they made tents in Acts chapter 18. Talked about them. We're going to circle back to them a little bit. Who else? Was there another one? Okay. Okay. Maybe so. So Deborah worked as a judge, or she served in that role in the land. Where'd she work? Why? Okay. Her husband died. Her father-in-law died. You know, the men in the family were gone, and she, Naomi, were by circumstances forced to go back to Israel, and she was just basically dependent on the generosity of others to go out and to get the gleanings, you know, in the field and to take that. And so, yes, but she was a field worker in that case. Anybody else? Doesn't have to be a married woman or a widow lady. Miriam, I believe, was his sister, right? Yes, but Moses' mother, right, worked to take care of him. So she was brought in by Pharaoh's daughter to take care of him. So, a nanny, I guess you'd say. How about Rachel? What did she do? Genesis 29. When Abraham sent his servant up to find her, or I'm sorry, Isaac. Yeah, to find a wife for Isaac. Rebecca. Yes, Rachel did. I'm getting Rachel and Rebecca mixed in my head here. But Rachel, yes, was a keeper sheep. When Jacob went up to the land and he was looking for someone and she was keeping her father's sheep, she came to the well, he opened the well, all that unfolded there. So you see that there are women in the Bible who worked or labored in a non-motherly, non-wifely type of way, but they were working in these things. And so the Word of God does not say that women can't do anything except dishes and housework and changing diapers and things like that. It doesn't say that. But it does talk about their primary role is being that homemaker when they have it. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But the abusive work that the workbook addresses, and this is true for men or women, what are some abuses of work? Where work is good, work is honorable, there's a command specifically to men to work, but what are dangers and abuses in that? Okay, spending time at the job versus the home, and what kind of things what kind of issues are you thinking of, Charles? Okay. Any other thoughts on that, Hank? Okay, what if the husband takes a job to get away from his wife? Yeah. So, Mike. Or they're trying to work their way up, and so they work the overtime, they work extra long hours, and to Charles's point, he's never home. You know, some some people in different professions, I think of doctors and lawyers, especially when they're starting out in their careers, they might work 20-hour days for a couple of years. Just that's the nature of their work. And even when they get into their full career, they might work extended amount of time, and the only time their family sees them is a little bit of time on the weekend, and that's it. There's no involvement really through the week. Well, there's the dangers you have to be aware of. How is this going to impact the family with this kind of work? I know my father, he worked for IBM, and for most of my life growing up, he was out of town. Like 2 weeks at a time, home for a weekend, 2 weeks at a time, home for a weekend. That was very frequent. I can remember several years, formative years, and it was not healthy for our family at all. And so men can take jobs that, hey, it's a good job and it makes good money, but he's gone so much of the year that his wife and his children are left to fend for themselves, and he's not really involved. Or maybe they take jobs where they're gone for long stints. Like I know some oil field type jobs, they may be gone 30 or 60 days, and then they come back, and then they're gone another 30 or 60 days. And boy, that's just not healthy for a family life. Mm-hmm. 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 Yep. So going beyond those kinds of time issues and struggles and challenges, what are some others maybe that the book mentioned or you thought of? Okay, there are some women who they want a career, but they also want a family. They want both. And so they, maybe Sandy, to your point, they get married, they get pregnant, they go on the 6 weeks or 3 months or however long maternity leave, but then they go back to work. Where does the child go? Daycare, grandma, neighbor, maybe takes care of them. Something like that comes along. Whose primary duty is it? Or it could be because the woman makes more than the husband. Well, honey, why don't you stay home? I'll go to work. Boy, that just completely flips what the scriptures reveal. The husband needs to be working. The wife needs to be managing the home, not the other way around. So, yeah, what other kind of troubles come up? What are some dangers in the workplace? Especially, let's say, modern. Not saying it never existed before, but okay. Women coming in mass into the workforce. And again, this happened before, we understand. But the closeness of those relationships and them being there, spending more time with someone of the opposite sex at work than you do your own spouse, well, it's not shocking that there was a great rise in adultery and divorce rates, in the 20th century because of that change in the dynamic in the workplace. But that could be not just on sexual sins, but drinking and cursing and lying and all kinds of things, because this environment you're in is just ungodly, worldly, impure. Now, I don't live in a fantasy world to think, well, you can just get away from that. Because our world, especially in modern times, is filled with all kinds of debauchery in pretty much every work environment that there is out there. It's out there. But if it's something that's tripping you up, if it's something you can see, this is affecting me, you have got to make changes. You can't just say, well, it's not that big a deal. It's a job. I have a job. I'm making money. I need to stay here. There are some environments you just need to get out of. Just, even if it means a pay cut, you got to get out of there, because it's just too much of a drag and pull on you away from the Lord and what's right, and maybe your family life. It's got to change. So we have to remember responsibilities in the home. Now, what are some reasons given and or motivating factors that men or women use to the detriment of their family? As to, I'm going to work because of this, even though it hurts the family. In the case, I'll just tell you, in the case of my father, it was, I want to provide better for you than what I had growing up. Because he grew up poor in East Tennessee in the mountains. He was hillbilly type people. Well, I want to provide better for you. Well, okay, make good money, but where are you? You know, that's an issue. Zach.
Great question. The thought process would be, well, I went to school for this, or I'm really talented at this, therefore I must pursue it in a vocation, even if it means certain negative consequences for my family. I'm meant to do this work, therefore I must. That's one of the conclusions you have to go.
And I would say, particularly for women in our society, if their parents paid for them to go to school to get a degree, they're out there working, and then she tells her parents, hey, I'm planning on having babies and staying home. Why would you throw away your education? Why would you throw away your career? Sometimes that's what happens. I trust none of us would have that attitude, but that can be a pressure that's there, the pride in the work, the personal pride or pressure being put on you because of that, gratifying the ego. Any others you can think of? Maybe avoiding, as we said a while ago, family responsibilities. Well, I want to do this because I don't want to be at home and dealing with that mess there. And so I'm Mike. We need the money. We need the money because we need the car, we need the vacation, we need the X, the Y, the Z. Yeah. All right, so what does family life look like in the Bible? I want to spend a few minutes, our last few minutes, thinking about this. So occupations and vocations. A while ago, Hannah, what did you mention? I'm sorry, the other Hannah. What were they doing? What was their occupation or vocation? Okay, they made tents, so they were tradesmen or craftsmen in their work. Okay, my Hannah. Is there another one? Trade or occupation? Right, yeah. She made tapestries. She bought and sold property. Yeah, so she was involved in that. What other occupations? Come on. Fishermen. All right. Peter, James, John, Andrew, fishermen. Carpenter. Joseph and Jesus being in the carpentry business. What else? Soldier. So what type of job is that? Yes, he was a centurion. How would we classify that job? So if you got like tradesmen over here, what type of job is a soldier? What industry does that fall under? Government job, right? It's a government job. And it's a military job, but it's a government job, right? What other government jobs in the Bible? Tax collectors, government job, or contractor really is what they were. But there was government contractor is exactly what he was. What? King? Yeah. Somebody's in charge of everything, right? So, what's that? A Caesar? Yep, exactly right. How about a treasurer? Treasurer of Ethiopia? All right, that's another government job. So, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Jesse, David, farm and ranch type work. So thinking about all that, think about those family dynamics that were involved in some of these different ones. And when you read about these individuals, you very often read about how their family was with them. Right? Cornelius, he was a soldier stationed at Caesarea. And what do we know about him? What do we read about there in Acts 10? Godly man. His household was with him, right? He called together his friends and relatives to hear the gospel. So his family was with him. One of the things I did not like about the Air Force is being sent overseas for a year without my wife. That was not good. And so he was a man who was able to have his family there with him. How about 1 Corinthians 9? Hannah, go ahead. Jailkeeper, right? Acts chapter 16. And his household was there, right? So 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 5. Who's got that for us? 1 Corinthians 9, 5.
Have we not power to lead about the church, a wife as well as with apostles and as brethren of the Lord and Cephas?
Okay, so what occupation is that? Okay, preachers, right? And he says, hey, don't we have the right to take along a wife? The brothers of the Lord, Cephas in particular. Of course, Paul is just making an argument about the right of support. But his point is, these other men, when they go about, they've got their wife with them. And they have the right to ask for support to be able to have their wife with them. So you see this, and then Aquila and Priscilla are together. They were in Rome, and then they were in Corinth. So they're working and laboring together. And the whole point, really, of the lesson is the idea that with work, the husband and the wife cannot forget their primary roles, duties, and responsibilities in the home. It can't get lost in work. There's a role, there's a responsibility. Families have different dynamics, different necessities that maybe are forced upon them in life. Maybe the husband gets sick and he can't work anymore, and the wife has to go and try to earn some money. There may be situations like that, but there's still primary duties and responsibilities in the home, and we need to keep those in mind so that our homes are good homes, stable homes, godly homes. Any other thoughts? All right, thank y'all.